Borderlands is all about maxing out your character's damage, about perfectly spending your skill points as to not waste any potential damage. With 4 skill trees per character in Borderlands 3, this is even harder now than in previous games, especially considering how insanely good every tree is. Amara is no exception to this, and a lot of her good skills are especially hard to pick out from her bad skills. Hey everyone, I'm Constant Canadian, and these are the 10 best Amara skills in Borderlands 3. Have you ever gone down to a radiation dot after taking out all of the enemies in sight? I know I have, and at times like those, I'm glad I'm spec'd into Guardian Angel. Guardian Angel is a skill in Amara's brawler tree that will revive Amara anytime she goes into fight for your life. There is a 2-minute cooldown on this skill, but it oftentimes seems way quicker than that. Guardian Angel can be a really good save for those moments when you've killed all of the boss's minions, and then they decide to down you. The only real downside to this skill is the aforementioned cooldown, and the fact that it is a tier 5 skill in the brawler tree, meaning that you have to spend 21 points in that tree to unlock it. Given the fact that the brawler tree is one of Amara's least popular trees, very few people will end up ever using this skill. Next up we have Infusion. Infusion is a tier 1 skill in Amara's Fist of the Elements tree. What Infusion does is convert up to 40% of Amara's weapon damage to her action skill element. For a very long time after Borderlands 3 came out, this skill was actually considered to be bad for Amara, since damage from Infusion did not count for Sustainment. So using this skill would essentially take away 40% of Amara's lifesteal. However, in April of 2020, Gearbox finally fixed the skill so that it could work properly with Sustainment. Infusion is an essential skill for any elemental powerhouse Amara, since it allows Amara to deal every single element with one gun using the correct anointments. Definitely a must-have, especially considering it's only a tier 1 skill. Another crazy powerful skill for Amara is Combo Breaker. Combo Breaker is a tier 3 skill in Amara's Enlightened Force tree that gives Amara a 20% chance to reset her action skill cooldown when she kills an enemy with melee damage. This skill was an absolute game changer for melee builds. It essentially allows Amara to spam the crap out of her action skill, as long as she kills things with melee damage. Naturally, of course, since this is an Amara skill, it doesn't need to be an actual melee attack either. It can be procced by the Face Puncher, Blade Fury, or Fish Slap, and it can make a world of difference. Considering it only requires 1 point for its full effect, Combo Breaker is an absolutely amazing skill. Sustainment is another absolutely essential skill for elemental powerhouse Amaras. Sustainment is a tier 5 in Amara's Fist of the Elements tree that gives Amara lifesteal based on any elemental damage she deals. This skill is pretty mediocre from level 22 to 50 when damage isn't that high, but as your level increases and the damage you do goes up, so does the lifesteal of Sustainment. At level 72, Mayhem 10 or 11, you literally don't need any more than 1 point in this skill, since the damage you deal is so high that even the 2% lifesteal you get is fully healing you every single shot. On top of that, it's not just gun elemental damage, it's all elemental damage, meaning it heals you from grenade and action skill elemental damage too. With this skill, it's almost impossible to die as Amara. Personal Space is a complete no-brainer for any gun damage Amara builds. Personal Space is a tier 1 skill in the brawler tree that gives Amara increased damage based on how close she is to the enemy. Personal Space can give up to 54% extra gun damage at 3 out of 3 points, and is almost always the first skill that I go for when I start a fresh Amara. The best part of this skill is that to get max damage, you don't even need to be that close. Amara has almost 0 skills boosting gun damage, so Personal Space is definitely a must-have if you are using guns on Amara. Burn Both Ends is a tier 4 skill in Amara's Enlightened Force tree. This skill essentially just gives you free damage. Burn Both Ends gives Amara increased threat for a short time after activating an action skill. Burn Both Ends also gives Amara a stacking elemental damage buff every time she takes damage, up to 5% per stack, up to 15 stacks. This skill is incredibly useful if you're playing solo, since if you're playing solo and playing Amara, the only thing that enemies can shoot at is you anyway. So regardless of the duration of your taunt, you'll constantly be stacking up Burn Both Ends and getting that insane elemental damage. The only real problem with Burn Both Ends is that it, as far as I know, has zero indicator of how many stacks you're at, so you kinda just have to hope for the best with it. But as long as you're in combat, you're probably at 15 stacks all the time anyway. Wrath is one of Amara's other gun damage skills. Wrath is a tier 4 skill in the Mystical Assault tree, and its benefit is pretty simple. Gun damage up to plus 20% and double that for 8 seconds upon activating an action skill. There really isn't much to say about this skill. It's cheap with only 3 points maximum, and chances are, if you're playing Amara, you're probably going down the Mystical Assault tree for Avatar anyway, so it's pretty much a no-brainer. While Laid Bare isn't a crazy skill with insane interactions, it's a really solid skill for any Amara running Phase Cast, Phase Slam, or Phase Flare. Laid Bare is another tier 4 skill in the Mystical Assault tree, and it pairs really well with the last skill on this list, Wrath, especially if you're running Phase Slam, Phase Cast, or Phase Flare. Laid Bare basically just makes any enemy damaged by your action skill take up to 25% extra damage for 8 seconds. This skill pairs really well with Wrath, as combining them together can give your guns an extra 62% damage, just based on those 6 points to max both Laid Bare and Wrath. Definitely a must-have for any Amara build. In second place we have Remnant. Remnant is a tier 5 skill in Amara's Mystical Assault tree. With only 1 point in Remnant, on kill the enemy will release a homing projectile that deals damage of Amara's action skill element. What makes Remnant really good though is that any excess damage dealt to that enemy is added to the projectile's damage as well. While this may not seem like much, the Remnant orb also gets mayhem scaling and any bonuses to action skill damage, and it still gets elemental bonuses. So with 50 stacks in Do Harm, the projectile does 225% extra action skill damage, and then if it's Fire and Flesh, it gets another extra 75% damage, and that's not even considering mayhem scaling. Remnant is a skill that triple dips into damage multipliers, and it's kind of broken at Mayhem 10 or 11. It's honestly such a commonly abused skill for Amara mains that I'm sure a lot of people are surprised it's not number 1 on this list. A couple of honorable mentions for this list are Animo, which is a really helpful skill except for the fact that it does literally nothing for Amara's cryo element, and last I checked it buffed Barrel's damage to crazy levels. Another skill is Samsara, which I really like. Samsara stacks Amara's weapon damage and gives health regen up to 20% when she damages an enemy with her action skill. However, trying to keep up full stacks of this skill is just too difficult to be worthwhile, since it doesn't actually activate with Ties That Bind. And finally, at number 1 is Body and Mind. Body and Mind is a tier 5 kill skill in Amara's Enlightened Force tree. On kill, Body and Mind gives Amara bonus splash damage on any melee damage she deals. The Enlightened Force tree and Brawler tree have very considerable bonuses for splash damage, which really comes in handy with this skill. However, where Body and Mind really gets stupid is when it's being used in conjunction with the Face Puncher or the Blade Fury. It's no secret at this point that these guns shoot melee damage, but that also means that instead of Body and Mind proccing once per second like with a normal melee attack, you can proc it 5 times per second with the Blade Fury, or 14 times per shot with the Face Puncher. This leads to some absolutely disgusting damage, and it quite frankly just makes melee Amara so brokenly overpowered. Anyway, that's gonna wrap up this list. Are there any good Amara skills that I missed? Let me know in the comments down below. Thank you all so much for watching, and have a fantastic day.